You're listening to the Clear Creek Resources Podcast from Clear Creek Community Church. To hear more, check out clearcreekresources.org. Welcome, guys, to the Clear Creek Resources Podcast. Susan Wesley, I'm going to butcher y'all's titles. Our PIN director of People in Need Ministry.
Yeah.
See, I
Care
knew
and
it.
Support Associate.
Oh,
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I oversee people in need. Yes.
But also, so it was not even close.
It's okay.
And Lance Lawson, you just go ahead and say your title. So,
Campus pastor for church on Wednesday, and then I get to help lead our marriage and family ministry.
okay, awesome. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank
How
you.
y'all doing?
Good. Doing good.
It's good to have both of you back on the podcast.
Thank you.
So we're in the middle of a podcast series where we're talking about how to talk to our kids, whether they're our kids, our grandkids, the people who we're leading in church, our friends, whatever it is. How do we talk to kids about these big topics that can be hard conversations? We've talked about a few different things, but today we're talking about how do we talk to our kids about bullies? Because, it's a big topic. Mm-hmm. It's a big topic online. It's a big topic in schools. We have kindness campaigns, but I don't always know how to do that as a parent. How do I have these conversations? So do you guys have any experience with this in your own lives? Susan, have you ever walked through this?
Yeah, I can recall things when I was growing up. Of course, we didn't use that language. That wasn't really, we didn't use the language of bullies. And we really didn't even when my girls were in school. But each one of them had seasons of experiences that would probably qualify as bullying. Mm-hmm. And, I didn't think about it as being that at that time. But there was some more significant than others. One daughter would stand outside a classroom every day waiting to go into the classroom. And another student would walk by and knock her books out of her hand every single day. Mm. And so I was reflecting.
See, I'm already angry.
I have to say, as I've thought about this over the last week, I have been triggered a little.
Yeah.
But I was talking to her about that this week, and she said, because she didn't tell me.
Right.
And when that was going on, I didn't know about that until much later. And she said, well, I spoke to one of my teachers, and my teacher made this person publicly apologize, which...
Not helpful.
Not helpful. So, a well-meaning adult that just did think about the unintended consequences, right? So,
Yeah. I was bullied in junior high, and I remember years later as an adult, my mom sort of knew, like a little bit, but not really. She didn't really understand the day-to-day, like how intense and constant it was. And as an adult, she finally realized it from me and other people. And she said, like, what? I didn't know. I didn't understand. And I was like, I don't even know. I don't know.
Yeah,
but,
kids are mean.
yeah.
they are.
It's just the way it works.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Kids are mean. And so how do we respond to that? So when it comes to your kids, do you just wait until something like that happens? Or do you prepare them that kids are mean ahead of time? Lance, what do you think?
So far, fortunately, my kids at least haven't told me about any experiences that they were bullied through elementary school. I spent a lot of time in student ministry, and I got to observe the effects of it in students, especially junior high. Junior high is just a hard years for everybody. Yeah. And so I remember when my kids were little and I was leading in student ministry, just making the decision, I'm going to talk to them before they go to junior high about bullying. So they have at least like the concept in their mind and my expectations for them around that. Mm-hmm. And so I think I've talked in other podcasts about the time I spend in the summer between elementary school and junior high with each of my kids, some one-on-one time, and we have 4 conversations. This is one of those 4.
It's one of your big topics.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And is it centered on how do you respond, or is it like your expectations for how you treat others?
It's all of that.
It's all of
it.
It's
really a long conversation about what happens if it happens to you, if it happens to someone you know, and you better not ever be a part of it. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But, but yeah, it's wide-ranging. So I'll just throw another anecdote into there. I think that really shaped how important I view this. The first funeral I ever did was for a 12-year-old who was bullied. And like, it was a really hard first funeral. It was a hard funeral anyway, but like,
gosh. Yeah.
I just never want to do that again.
Yeah.
And so I certainly don't want my own kids to walk through that. And so that really shaped the weight this
Yes.
carries in my life as one responsible for younger people. First my kids, but then all the other young people in my life.
Right.
I so appreciate you sharing that with us because that's devastating, and it is that weighty. And so, it's like looking at all the topics we're discussing, this one can seem like because there are kindness campaigns, oh, well, we're all just sort of talking about it. But this, if you are bullied,
Yeah.
it's a life-altering experience. I mean, I still, I'm not going to talk about this the whole time, but like I was changed my personality changed through that experience, and I still carry it today.
Yep.
And so that means that it's something we have to be talking to our kids about because it's prevalent too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And young people don't know how to respond. Like we all internalize things that happen to us. But when kids are at the age where they're like beginning puberty, they're concrete thinkers. They don't have abstract thought. Like we talk a lot about that in all these circles, but like they don't know what to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they just keep it to themselves, and that's dangerous.
Yes.
So, those of us in their lives need to help them know what to do.
Right.
Yeah, so I appreciate, like you said, you've talked before that when your kids are making this big transition into adolescence, you have lots of big conversations with them, which is so important. But this is so important that this is one of the topics that you're preparing them for. So, so we want to prepare them. And then what do you do whenever your kid's in the middle of it? Because I know that was your experience. How do you respond then?
So in both of the situations with my other girls, when those things became to be aware that this was happening at school, and it was at school, both of these situations. First of all, I think parents, it's so hard not to react with anger and so, but I think it's important to get curious and get quiet and listen and let them sort of flesh out what is actually going on. We didn't have that language when my girls were in school. We didn't call that bullying. We referred to it as just being unkind. Just this person's being unkind. And when I could tell that it was becoming a problem, especially, you start out by trying to shape their response to it, and which is, you still have to do that because the world's unkind at times. And this is part of a parent's responsibility is I'm helping you learn how to live in this world, and you can still respond kindly to people who are unkind. And you want to empower kids, I think, as much as you can to know that they have the volition to say, I'm not going to play with you right now while you're acting that way. I want to be your friend, but I'm not going to participate in that. I'm not going to let you talk to me like that. I'm going to separate myself. And kids today, that sometimes feels unkind, but that's really strength. It's to be able to say that to another child. So I think you have to mold their response. There was really just one time that I actually took steps to get involved and confronted a parent.
How did you make that choice? Because I want to go back to some of what you talked about with how you're preparing your kid and talking to your kid, but also really, how do you make that choice? I think that's very hard to know. When is there life? When is there goodness in speaking with another parent?
Well, and Lance may have more to say about that. For me, when I began to see how this was affecting my daughter so significantly, I couldn't let it go. And she had tried to use her words to stop the behavior, and it wasn't stopping. And so we needed help. And so, it was a hard thing to do, and I would do it again. I probably would do it faster this time.
I was wondering that.
Yeah. I think some of the culture has changed a little bit. We talk about bulldozer parents are just much more prevalent. And so I think for a lot of people, they need to think about like when like holding back, I guess, on some of that. I remember being at a toddler's birthday party and watching one toddler take a toy from another, and a mom got up and took the toy away from this other kid and gave it back to her own child. Like, that's an example of like jumping into the middle of something you have no business.
Yes.
You're preventing your kid from learning how to cope. And so there is a fine line between equipping them to cope and jumping in the middle of everything.
Yes.
So I just think that takes experience and wisdom. Don't decide that on your own. Like, don't jump into the middle of everything. Ask other people.
I think that is very evidence of the generational change.
Yeah.
Because no one would have done that.
Yeah.
In my circle of friends, we would have let the kids figure that out.
Right.
But I do see a lot of my kids' parents and all that age group jumping in very quickly. And you got to think about, what does that say to your child?
Right.
Number one, you can't handle this.
Yep.
And we're not teaching them how to handle it.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's undermining their confidence.
Yeah.
So,
It's really, I mean, whenever you're describing sort of like how this maybe would look like if it works out perfectly, and I understand it's really hard and complicated, but, you know, expecting your kid to try to handle it first, and then with a group, and then with, you know, their elders, their parents, and then with the administration, if you have to. I mean, it's really sort of the same way we think about confrontation within the church.
Right.
Is it, you start with seeking the person out. You have harmed me, even though that is really, really hard for kids.
yes. It's hard for adults.
It's hard for adults. You're right.
Yeah.
It is.
That's why, for me, preparation is so important. You want to catch it before it happens.
Yes.
And the first part of the conversation I've had with my kids is, I want you to hear from me the truth about who you are. And I want to solidify that. Like, listen, there are things that stand out about you that people could pick on, but those don't matter. Let me tell you the truth. You are loved. You are valued. Here are the things about you that make you so unique and wonderful. And if anybody says anything different, you now have something to fall back on.
Yeah.
And you know the truth about yourself. And so I hope that as my kids experience negativity from other people and unkindness, at least they have a foundation of their father has told them, there's a different truth about me than what this person's saying.
Absolutely.
I love that.
I do
I'm
too.
about to start crying.
So
Because that is just, I mean, I think that if there's anything you can do for your kids in this, even though there's all these other things we're going to talk about, it is that.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is being the person who's telling your kid who they really are.
Yeah.
Right.
I've had to do that already with my 7th grade daughter. Just, you know, she's taller than I am, and put her on my shoulder
Right.
and say, "This is actually who you are. Let me tell you who you are."
yeah.
And that she's going to remember that, even if it
She
doesn't fix. It's not going to fix everything, but she'll remember.
She
I love
absolutely
that.
will.
Yeah, yeah,
So that
That's
that
really good.
prepares them to handle
Yes.
an initial experience.
yeah.
Yes.
To learn to cope and to sort all that stuff out in their mind and figure out which voice am I going to listen to.
Right.
And so I think that's a good first step
Yes.
that hopefully keeps you as a parent from having to get involved.
Right.
But there are times you may need to.
Right. Right.
Well, I also appreciate what you said, that our kids also have to know that to stand up for yourself, you're not unkind if you're doing that, because we're talking about sort of like being kind versus being a bully. And so some kids out there are like, well, if I talk back to someone or if I stand up for myself, then I'm being mean.
Right.
And that's really important for a lot of kids to understand that.
Yes. And help them to feel like they're empowered to do that.
Yes.
They can say, I don't want to play with you while you're acting that way. And that's okay to separate yourself out. And, you know, I know maybe if you're going to talk about the cyberbullying kind of world, it's a lot more difficult today than it was, because you could physically walk away and you're out of the presence, and there's a whole other world out there that
Absolutely.
is so detrimental. But yet we still have a choice, and our kids have a choice. They don't have to be on that,
Yeah.
you know, whatever that, you know, thing is.
Yeah.
What is it?
Whatever
Social
it is
media
to,
or
hey,
a device or a platform.
Yes,
or,
thank
by the
you.
time we put this out, it'll be different. So we'll see. But that's like the confidence to say, I can be a loving, kind, good person and say, you're not allowed to treat me that way. And also setting boundaries. I mean, because whether you're walking away physically or you're taking yourself off of whatever platform it is, that's a boundary to protect yourself.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And too often, I think we're giving our kids access to those platforms that are unregulated and uncontrolled, and we may not even be in them or familiar with them. And so there is no way to be able to step in.
Right.
And those things never go away. They never stop.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. That's one generational difference.
Yes.
For all of us, we went home,
Yeah.
Right.
and the bully from school
Was
went to their
gone.
house. And so if you have a device in your pocket or purse or whatever, and it goes with you everywhere, and if you're getting notifications or whatever, like,
Yeah.
there's a big difference
yeah.
in what kids experience today than what
Yes.
a lot of us grew up with.
Yes. And there again, you have a choice though.
Yep.
You know.
Right.
And so, help your child choose something that's good for them.
Yeah.
In that sense.
While we're on this, I don't want to miss, there are apps that you can put on your child's phone that can monitor for things like that and send you alerts. And I know everybody's got a different idea about how involved or engaged they want to be on their kid's device, but you can just Google one that I use is Bark. And I haven't gotten any notifications, but I have had friends who use the same app, and their daughter's friend texted her about something that had some self-harm language in there. They got a notification and were able to check the phone.
Wow.
There are just really good tools out there that are worth looking into.
Yeah. It worked.
Yeah, it
That's
did.
good.
Yeah,
That's really good.
Yeah, it's another level of intentionality
right.
Yes.
with phones
Yep.
and the internet and all the platforms. Yeah. So is there anything else practical? So if you find your kid in a situation where they're really being bullied, so make sure they know who they are, make sure they're prepared ahead of time, get involved if you have to. Is there anything else practical, a way to talk with your kids about that? I just don't want to miss anything.
I tried to give my kids
Yeah.
clear next steps. So beyond the foundation that I try to lay is when this happens to you, and I say when, because kids are mean. And so when someone says something to you,
Yeah.
speak up. I'm always going to be safe, but I know you may not always want to talk to me, but you have a ton of other safe adults in your life, and I point them out.
Yep.
Any of these people you can go to, but you have to speak up.
Yep.
Don't just keep it to yourself. And so,
That is really helpful.
Yes. Yes.
yeah.
It's really helpful. I mean,
like-
because they're not always going to want to talk to you, but even we have older kids, people in high school
Right.
Yes.
who are in our lives, who they know you can talk to them and they want you to, and they love you,
Yes.
so, and they maybe trust them a little bit more in certain
Sure.
situations. And so that's just super helpful.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think one thing that I'm hearing from you guys too is sometimes I think about bullying from this pervasive, it's happening all the time, we have to get involved. But really we are talking about kindness, like you said, and that could just be something that's happens at one time, which is sort of what you're saying too. It might not be pervasive and might not be one kid who's always saying it, but is it different if it's just, hey, this is how you react when someone's mean to you tomorrow,
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question.
Yeah.
We're trying.
I was just listening to you say it's not.
Right.
I mean, your reaction is the same depending on how it affects you. Stand up for yourself.
Yeah. I think that when it's pervasive, there are clues and cues that you can pick up on. And there's a ton of research and behavioral stuff out there about it. But your kids start acting differently in all arenas when something is pervasive. And so, I would just encourage parents, if you start noticing different behaviors in your child or different things, it might be something like this happening behind the scenes you're just not aware of.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to differentiate between what is just normal conflict with kids as opposed to bullying. Bullying isn't like this repetitive, intentional hurting. It's usually a power difference, whereas normal conflict, we as parents, that's our role, is to help them navigate through that. And when they, one of the things that all three of my girls said that they remember hearing is that hurt people when they were growing up. And it's so when you see someone that's hurting others, try to develop that empathy for them to understand that there's a reason why they're behaving. Behavior is communication, and they're acting that way for a reason. not that it's an excuse by any means, but there's a reason. And so let that kind of drive how you respond to them as opposed to for vengeance or
That's so
things like
helpful.
that.
Yeah, how you respond to them, and again, how you think about yourself.
Yes.
Hurt people. So just know this isn't actually about you.
Right.
This is who you are.
Right.
This is about them.
Right.
And so it affects how they think about themselves and how they respond.
It's really hard for young people to differentiate that,
Oh,
though.
Yes.
Because for the
Yes.
first time in their life, they're asking the question, who am I?
Right.
And now someone else is telling them
Yes.
something about who they are.
Right.
Yeah, and who they should be.
Right.
It's
And so
hard.
it's really hard for an adolescent, especially the younger ones, to think outside of themselves now about that other person.
Sure.
This is really more about them than it is about me. That's part of what's so challenging.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And some people are more given to empathy.
Yeah.
I have 9 grandchildren. I mean, I have a couple of grandkids that showed empathy at 2.
Right.
And then some, we're still waiting for it, But that, not everybody's the same on that. But we can teach kids to learn that empathy is kind of a skill. We can teach kids to learn that,
Yeah, and like you said in the very beginning, it's very natural and normal for your first response to just be anger.
Oh, yeah.
I am fixing this. It's your kid.
Right.
But if you can model empathy for whoever's harming your kid, then they're going to be much, much more able to too.
Yes.
Because if you're mad and you go off, then guess what they're going to do? But that's easy to do.
Oh, it's so easy to do. And it's always easy, I think, as parents, because we want, we assume the best of our kids and the worst of the,
Yes, absolutely.
And so if we can try to look at that from a perspective of let's hear the whole thing, and that's why being curious and being quiet kind of helps to really get a feel for what's really going on.
Yeah. I think being curious and quiet has been a theme already with all of these podcasts.
Really?
Listen, ask more questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of that, we think the best of our kids. What if it turns out your kid is the one who is the bully? And I actually want to be careful about that because, kids can make mistakes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And like we said, be
They will.
mean doesn't we don't have to
Right.
have a label
Right.
blanket on their character. But they're going to make mistakes even though we love them and we know them. So what do we do when we get that phone call? Whether it's a parent or a school or we just even see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me just rewind a little bit,
Yeah.
try to get ahead of that. In my conversation with my kids, I tell them, this likely will happen to you. You're going to see it happen to other people. It better never come from your lips. Like
Yeah.
my expectation is you don't behave this way.
Yes.
I know that they're not perfect. I know,
Right.
I am aware they're going to make mistakes, but they've heard clearly from me, we don't do this.
Yes, absolutely.
In our family, what Jesus says about who we are and how we're to live, like we don't act this way. And so if and when you ever do, you have me to deal with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they know in advance what my expectations are and that my response to them is going to be stern.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not a surprise.
Right.
If that happens, it's
right.
it's also preparing them.
That's right.
It
Preparing
is.
them to not be a bully.
Yeah, and part of that, because again, kids are going to make mistakes, and they're young and impressionable, and they're going to go along with the crowd. And I want to help my kids see that, like, there are times you need to be aware that the crowd is not healthy. The crowd is being unkind or mean,
Right.
and so if you observe that, step out of it. Don't just go along. And again, that's part of it. Is like helping my kids see more than just right in front of their face.
Yes.
Yeah, because in junior high and in high school too, I mean, it's easy to follow, to just conform to your peers. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just part of life. And so if there's someone who's being unkind to someone else and you're a part of that peer group, it is so easy for them to just fall into that.
Yeah, it seems normal to you
Right.
because that's what your friends are doing.
Right. But there again, it's cultivating that empathy for them to learn how to put themselves in other people's shoes when your kids are in preschool, they come home and inevitably they have a bite mark on their arm. And the parent that gets all upset, I just think, you understand that your kid is going to do that to somebody
That's right.
at some point.
Yep.
You're going to be the bitee and the biter. That's just the nature of humans. And so our kids are going to do things that we hang our heads in shame about, that we are upset about. But how we respond to that is just as important, and we want to show empathy to them to understand that behavior is also a communication. So what's going on, what's causing that? What are you doing? What's going on in your heart? That's, maybe being expressed this way. So
Yeah,
don't make them the bully,
That's so helpful. Not only, sort of looking at your own heart. So how do I feel about this? Do I have shame as a parent? Because you don't want to respond to your kid out of your own embarrassment. That's not ever going to go well.
Nope.
So just know your kids are going to mess up and then respond out of love and expectation that they're going to mess up. And then again, like I love that you said that it's the same thing. It's empathy with your kid when they're messing up. Yeah. It's not actually different.
And how you as a parent respond in the moments where they mess up small is going to matter when they mess up big.
Yes.
And their willingness to come to you when real big things happen. And so you want to start that well when they're young, and just walk with them through these mistakes that they make.
That is part of being a child, is making mistakes and learning from them.
Yeah.
And we live in a world that just expects so much perfection of a 6-year-old. It's like, no, this is how they're learning, and we need to give them lots of room to learn.
It can sometimes feel easier to give empathy to other kids, than yourself, than your own kids,
right?
So or yourself,
yes.
But that's really, really important. What if your kid isn't necessarily the one hurting someone or the one in the they're just sort of watching, and you sort of spoken to this already, Lance. But what if they're just part of the crowd and they're just watching it happen all the time? How is that? Is it different? How does that different with how we talk to our kids?
I think our schools, our culture has really great language already for that. See something, say something. And I've just used that. And again, I try to model this with my kids, not just for those that are unkind, but in every area.
Yeah.
Like we want to see those that are in need. We want to see those that are hurting. We want to see those that have different circumstances than we do, and step into that. Now that doesn't mean jump in front of a bully and take a blow for someone, although it might. I don't know.
Right.
But like, I just want my kids to know God has made us to be people who intervene. And so you speak up for someone who isn't speaking up for themselves. That's the first step. Say something on their behalf.
I think that situation might be one of the most difficult. Maybe not the most life-forming, but really, really hard in that moment to be on the sideline and insert yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, because with kids that could have a real negative impact. When I was in 7th grade, we were coming home from a football game on a school bus. We pulled up in front of the school, and a bunch of girls jumped out off the bus and started beating up another little girl.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, and so my dad gets out of the car and goes and breaks up the fight. Well, in my 7th grade self, all I could think of is, I'm going to die tomorrow. I thought, oh my gosh, So I did not want my father to intervene. Of course, that was the right thing to do, and I obviously lived. But it was, I remember thinking, that's a terrible situation. I feel bad for her, but I didn't have the courage to get involved,
Yeah. I remember in, junior high and high school, the people who did. I also, I will always remember the people who did intervene on the rare occasions when someone was brave enough to do it. Yeah. That really is such a courageous and life-changing moment. You think well, I wasn't involved, but if you can, convince your kids to be that loving and brave and kind, it can really change someone's life.
Yes.
And how they view any situation, from everyone's against me to that's not true. Someone's for me, which is, that's what we want them to think.
Right. You think about how formative, too, it is for those kids that do that. Mm-hmm. That's, that stop the bad behavior. And,
So how do we think about our faith within this? I mean, you guys are really talking about it, but how can we really think through, if we're followers of Jesus, how does this affect how we're talking, all these conversations, from beforehand to in the middle of something to responses?
Well, I just think this is a new kingdom kind of perspective that we if as Christians, we live as brothers and sisters, and we treat each other with kindness and respect. Obviously, we live in a world that doesn't see those relationships like that. And so I think as Christians, we're called to live peaceably, as far as it depends on us. What it says is Romans, to be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. So God gives us a lot of words that help us latch on to some of the behaviors for us as people when we're encountering conflict, even when our children are encountering conflict. And sometimes we think, well, that's for the church or that's for out there, but it really has to start at home. Our faith really has to be demonstrated at home in this particular area. And that, I just think, I always wanted my kids to, whenever they locked eyes with someone, to think they're made in the image of God. Doesn't matter who they are made in the image of God. And so to treat them accordingly. So.
Yeah, I remember an incident at junior high camp a long time ago, and the night before, we had just laid out the gospel for a room full of junior high kids. It was the type of moment you hope for. And the very next day, we had some junior high girls one group picking on another group, and so we got all the girls into the room in the middle of the day, and the message to them was this: like, last night, we talked about how every one of us, when we stand before God, is found wanting. Like, there is something broken in every one of us that the before God, the field is level, and like none of us can match up. Who do we think that we are, that we can look at another person and say something about them? It's the whole speck in their eye and log in my eye type thing. Like, the gospel tells us we're all broken. And so to the bully, and if my kids ever do this, I'll remind them, who do you think you are? Right? That thing. But then I would I don't need to repeat everything you said, but as on earth as it is in heaven, we want people to experience relationships where they're valued as someone made in the image of God and called to reflect God's image to others. So.
And in the middle of it too, just thinking through, our kids really for the first time and living out the gospel, understanding and living it out. Even just the opportunity to experience confession and forgiveness and forgiving. I think it's just is ripe in these moments. Whether it's a friend that they're really just having a moment with, okay, you can confront them and then you forgive them because you're forgiven.
Right.
And if you are the one who's doing something, you need to confess and you are forgiven and loved well. Like, there's so much opportunity to show them what it looks like to embody the gospel.
Yes.
You heard the gospel, you believe the gospel. This is what it looks like to live that out. And like you said, this is going to keep happening.
Yeah.
This does not go away.
No, it does not, till Jesus comes.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I think is another just really great reminder for them. Like, this is not going away.
Right.
Like, this, you're getting prepared for whatever God has called you to.
Yeah.
And this is how you respond.
And I feel like I say this every time I'm on a podcast when we talk about kids, but I try to tell my kids what we believe isn't popular. And the way we're called to live our lives is different than the way the world is. And you have to point that out to kids.
Yes.
Because we are asking them to stand up, to live differently, and not just go with the crowd. And so that's part of foundation building in them. Like, what we believe is not popular.
That is really helpful because I think sometimes as parents, when we're having conversations, we forget that.
Yes. Yeah.
Because we live in a cultural Christian society, it seems like it is the same, but for them, they don't necessarily know that.
Right.
They have to really know, no, you really are different if you're following Jesus.
Yeah.
And it's going to look different.
Yep.
And he's called you to something different. And it's good.
Yes.
So I know you have resources. I want to hear what they are. What if, because this really, obviously, Lance could talk about this for 4 hours, which would be awesome. But how can parents really utilize some trusted resources that we could offer them?
One of the resources that I recently got acquainted with is called Raising Boys and Girls. And I should note Dave Thomas, I think, and Sissy Goff, and they're counselors in Nashville. and they do a podcast. They are counselors. So it's a podcast about people who are doing the work every day as well. And they just talk about kids' issues, and they do such a great job of it.
Oh,
So,
yeah. Podcast, that's so helpful.
yeah, it's very helpful. So,
What about you, Lance? Do you have anything?
Yeah, I would say, again, consider having some way to monitor what's happening on your kids' devices, their phones or tablets or whatever. Don't just assume that that's
you
a
know.
safe space and
Yeah.
that you know. And so there are ways to do that without crossing lines of privacy if you have a concern about that. So that, and then our children's ministries and student ministries at every campus have so many adults that want to be a safe adult in your kids' lives and want to shape them in the way it looks like to not just know Jesus, but live these kingdom values out. And so make it a priority for your child to be involved in these things at whatever age. And I know it's hard as they get older. I've got teenagers. I get it. There are a million other things fighting for their time, but your job as a parent is to shape them in this season, because you're not a parent right now. What you're doing ultimately is raising a future adult.
Right.
And so invest in all the right ways right now, because it matters for the future. It doesn't just matter for right now.
Yeah.
It matters for the future.
Yeah, I think that's helpful because it's like, then you're not just preparing in this one topic.
That's right.
And responding to this one topic. It's a whole worldview
Yep.
and character and expectations and relationship that you have that this is going to be a part of, but that's everything else too.
Yep.
I know we did a podcast with some student ministry leaders, and one thing they said, which I will always remember because I've got kids, is they said, we want to hear from you. We want to hear from parents. If you have questions about your kid or you want us to invest in them a certain way, like, we love your kids.
Yeah.
We're not just there. We love them, and we really want to have those conversations. And so I think that's just another great resource. You are free to reach out to them and say, tell me, if there's something I need to know, or please, be asking my kid this because you're not talking to me, or all those things. They're there to partner.
man, that, as someone my age and stage of life, there's just no way to tell you how valuable that is for your kids and for your kids and for this whole community. There's just, it's the thing that I would, if I could just hand to everybody, I would. I mean, just being at Children's Ministry Camp this year, it made us weepy to see all of these students that were being invested in like that. There's just no way to estimate how important that is. I would say to parents, don't lose heart and give up as they get older. Don't withdraw. Lean in as much as you can. They're going to lean away from you, which is right, but lean in emotionally with time and intention. You have much more influence than you think you do. And then involve other people. I mean, our kids always had a lot of adults in their life, and that was so helpful. So always involve other people too that you trust. Yeah.
Well, I just want to give you guys an opportunity if there's anything we missed, because I know we sort of rolled through our conversation, but I really don't want to miss anything. Is there anything else you think is just really something parents need to know in this before we close?
Yeah, I mean, we could talk for hours longer,
right.
but this isn't a silver bullet.
Yeah.
What you're saying, lean in, is so important.
Yeah.
Lean in.
Lean in.
Be the parent that you wanted to be when you brought them home from the hospital. If anything has caused you to think about that differently, like, lean back in.
Especially when it's hard.
Yeah, your time is running out, and so lean in.
Yeah. Time.
So I had a conversation with a parent not too long ago, and I said, if I asked your son what matters to mom, what would he say? And so that might be a good question to ask your kids. What do you think really matters to me? Because they have something in their head.
They will say something.
They will say something.
Yeah. Yeah, I was really, when you said that, I was really thinking having the relationship where we're trusted enough to because it takes time for them to tell you what's going on.
Yep.
It's not the first thing they say when they get in your car.
Right.
If it's not it's not what they say right before they go to bed. It takes time. And so I think that just made me think, like, that's one of the most important parts of this, is being with them, just with conversation enough to where they finally get there.
Yeah. If find ways to ask your kids questions every day. And it could be as simple as, who did you sit by at lunch today? Or if you could change one thing about one class today. I mean, just, it doesn't have to be about anything important. If you have a dialogue with your child regularly, they're going to feel more comfortable to come to you in these really serious and challenging moments.
Yeah. And then they're going to also trust you with when you try to give them some wisdom.
Yeah. That's
This is what I would do.
Yeah.
This is what we can do together.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys both so much. Y'all are both wise and helpful. And I know this will be a blessing for all the parents.
Hey, thanks for checking out this video. If you haven't yet, make sure that you hit subscribe down below and check out ClearCreekResources.org, where we have videos, books, and sermons on there, as well as our audio podcast. Thanks for watching.